One of the wonders of the world has been shut down to visitors. The Peruvian government forced to close Machu Picchu.
What archaeologists just found beneath Machu Picchu does not just add a footnote to history, it erases the chapter we thought we already knew.
If we look at Machu Picchu, we see buildings on the surface. What we don't see is that 60% of that city is underground.
For 500 years, the most famous mountain on Earth has been hiding something beneath its terraces, its temples, and its tourist viewpoints. And the people who just found it were not prepared for what it meant. This is the story they are still trying to contain. The bones that started everything. It was 2 in the morning when Dr. Lucy Salazar picked up the phone. She was in a genetics lab at Yale University, staring at results she had been waiting months to receive. On the other end of the call was her colleague, geneticist Dr. Richard Berger. She did not wait for pleasantries. She just told him what was on the screen. For months, Salazar and Berger had been leading a project to extract and sequence the DNA of 34 individuals buried within the walls of Machu Picchu. Not random bones from rubble, carefully placed burials, positioned deliberately throughout the citadel, interred over centuries. The study was supposed to be clean, confirmatory work, a genetic census validating what most scholars already believed, that Machu Picchu was a royal estate for the Inca Emperor Pachacuti, a private retreat in the clouds for the most powerful man in South America. The data said otherwise. The DNA profiles of those 34 individuals did not align with standard Inca highland populations. Not even close. The genetic diversity was staggering. People from completely different ethnic backgrounds, different regions, different linguistic groups, all buried together in one place. Some carried markers from coastal populations hundreds of miles to the west. Others traced to groups far to the north. Berger later described the findings as unlike anything the team had anticipated. This did not look like a royal retreat. It looked like something far more deliberate, far more complex. A place where people from across an entire empire were brought together on purpose by someone with the power to make it happen. And then Salazar found the 6 women. 6 female remains buried among the others carried DNA that traced not to the Andes Mountains, not to any highland population, to the Amazon rainforest, lowland jungle people found at 2,440 meters altitude in the clouds at a site supposedly reserved for Inca royalty. Stop and picture that distance. The Amazon basin and Machu Picchu are separated by some of the most brutal geography on the planet. Dense, sweltering jungle at near sea level, humidity so thick you can taste it. Then, a vertical climb through cloud forest, up mountain passes where the trails are barely wider than your shoulders. Temperatures swinging 40 degrees in a single day. Terrain shifting from mud to ice to exposed rock face. Modern hikers with satellite phones and Gore-Tex gear still die on routes like these. These women made that journey, or were made to make it. One pair stopped. Salazar cold, a mother and daughter, buried near each other. When the team analyzed the isotopes locked in their bones, the chemistry told 2 completely different life stories. The mother's bones carried one dietary and geographic signature. The daughter's carried another. 2 women connected by blood, separated by geography, and then reunited in death at 2,440 meters. Inside a citadel nobody was supposed to question. This was not migration. This was orchestrated. Someone with the authority to move people across an empire like pieces on a board decided these women needed to be here, and nobody in the Peruvian government wanted to touch the obvious question. Why? What role did they play? What does their presence tell us about what Machu Picchu actually was? Salazar sat with those results for a long time before she wrote anything down, because she understood what they meant beyond the data. These were not anonymous bones. Each set of remains represented a specific human life, a person who had grown up in the lowland jungle, who had spoken a different language, eaten different food, breathed different air, lived in a completely different world. And then, at some point in their life, someone with imperial authority had reached down into that world and moved them. Up through cloud forest and mountain passes and freezing altitude, to here, to a citadel that had no reason to want them, unless it did. The mother and daughter are the detail that stays with you. 2 people who loved each other, whose bones ended up feet apart in the same mountain citadel. who had never lived in the same place at the same time during their lives. The isotope data is not ambiguous. They spent their living years in different geographic regions, and then, in death, they were together, brought to the same mountain, buried in the same deliberate, formal manner as everyone else. Someone made sure they were together at the end, someone who knew exactly who they were. That level of care, combined with that level of power, tells you something about what Machu Picchu really was, and what the entire royal retreat theory completely failed to explain. Those questions were still unanswered when, overhead, someone else started scanning, and what they found from the sky made the DNA look like a footnote. What the lasers found. In 2024, researcher Ari Karamanica sat at the controls of a LiDAR-equipped drone, guiding it across forested slopes surrounding Machu Picchu that no tourist had ever set foot on. Areas classified for decades as natural wilderness, untouched jungle framing a known site, nothing to see here. He watched the screen as the laser pulses swept the ground. LiDAR fires millions of pulses per second and builds three-dimensional maps of what lies beneath vegetation, soil, even shallow rock. It strips away the jungle like peeling skin off a body. It sees what human eyes cannot. And then the structures started appearing. 12 of them. 12. Previously unknown buildings and platforms, hidden beneath centuries of jungle growth. Never appeared on any map, any survey, any archaeological record, in 500 years of exploration. Some showed the signatures of ceremonial platforms. Others looked residential, administrative. The point is not what they were. The point is they were there. They had always been there, and nobody knew. Here is what you need to understand about where these structures were found. The areas Karamanica scanned are restricted zones. Tourists cannot go there. Most researchers cannot go there. These are sections controlled by the Peruvian government, off limits for decades. Nobody has publicly explained why. Nobody has explained why scanning them was never a priority in the first place. 12 buildings hidden for 5 centuries, found in weeks, in areas the government had kept sealed. This is the kind of story that moves fast when it matters. Subscribe to Stellar Insights. I cover the discoveries they try to bury just as fast as the ones in the ground, because the restricted zones are only the beginning of why this matters. If 12 structures were hiding just outside the known boundaries, how many more are sitting in the surrounding valleys? How large was the original complex? Are we looking at a single citadel, or the exposed center of something far, far bigger? Keep that question, because the next discovery answered part of it, and the answer made everything worse. The Impossible X. In 2025, geologist Dr. Rualdo Menegat at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil ran his models a second time, then a third. The results kept coming back the same. 2 major fault lines, each stretching approximately 175 kilometers, crossed directly beneath Machu Picchu. Not near it, not close to it. Directly under it, forming a perfect X. The intersection point sits almost exactly where the main temple complex stands. Most people hear fault lines and think one thing: earthquakes, collapse, destruction. Run that assumption through Menegat's data and it shatters. His team ran over 1,000 earthquake simulations across every conceivable magnitude and direction. Every single simulation produced the same outcome. The intersection of those 2 fault lines is extraordinarily stable. The opposing tectonic forces cancel each other out, creating a geological sweet spot where the ground barely moves, even during significant seismic events. Let me be precise about what that means. The Inca built their most sacred site on the single most earthquake-resistant point in the entire region, a point that required orbiting satellites and supercomputers to locate in the 21st century. They found it in the 15th, without instruments, without written language, without any technology we can explain. Cusco has been devastated by earthquakes multiple times throughout history. Entire colonial districts leveled, churches collapsed, thousands killed. Machu Picchu still stands, 500 years. No significant structural damage from seismic activity, ever. Either they got miraculously lucky, choosing this one perfect spot out of thousands of possible mountain locations, or they understood something about the ground beneath their feet that we are only now catching up to. Sit with that for a second. We identified the single most seismically stable point in the entire region using satellite imagery and over 1,000 computer simulations. The Inca identified the exact same point 600 years earlier using methods we cannot reconstruct. And then they built their most important structure on it. When Menegat published, the Peruvian government said nothing. No response, no acknowledgement, complete silence. The same silence they gave to Salazar's DNA findings. A pattern of silence that, as you are about to see, means something very specific. Because what the geological data connected to was something engineers had been quietly documenting for years, something buried even deeper than fault lines, something that will make you look at the postcard image of Machu Picchu and never see it the same way again. The city beneath the city. Here is a fact that has not fully landed for most people. What tourists photograph, the terraces, the temples, the iconic viewpoint, is roughly 40% of the actual engineering, maybe less. 60% of Machu Picchu is underground. More than half of one of the most famous sites on the planet is invisible, buried beneath your feet when you stand there taking your photo. When excavation teams dug 3 meters beneath the visible terraces, they found it. Drainage systems, foundation networks, retaining walls, water channels carved from stone, an entire hidden city of engineering under the one the whole world thinks it knows. Think about that. Really think about it. The terraces you see in every photograph are not just agricultural platforms, they are the visible tops of a massive system that manages water flow, prevents erosion, and stabilizes the mountain itself against the very earthquakes those fault lines should be creating. Strip the postcard away, and you find layer after layer of invisible genius. The drainage network alone would be impressive by modern standards. Water entering at the highest point gets channeled through stone-lined conduits, redistributed across dozens of terraces, filtered through carefully graded gravel layers, expelled at the base of the mountain in controlled streams. Zero pooling, zero erosion, zero structural failure through monsoon seasons, earthquakes, and centuries of neglect after the Inca Empire collapsed. Built without iron tools, without wheels, without mortar between the stones. And it still works. Not theoretically, not in a museum exhibit sense. Actively, functionally working right now. As you watch this, ancient Inca drainage systems are managing rainfall on a Peruvian mountain more efficiently than most modern cities manage their stormwater. Engineers who have studied the system say it rivals anything built in the last century. Some say it surpasses it. Here's the thing nobody prepared you for. But here is the detail that keeps archaeologists up at night. At the highest point of Machu Picchu stands a carved granite pillar called the Intihuatana. The name means the place where the sun is tied. For decades, researchers treated it as ceremonial decoration. Interesting, not functional. Then someone measured it, precisely, with GPS satellites. 3 degrees. The Intihuatana is aligned within 3 degrees of true north. Not magnetic north, which drifts and wanders across the centuries. True geographic north. The actual rotational axis of the planet. This single carved stone functions as a solar calendar, marking solstices and equinoxes to within 15 minutes of accuracy, year after year, century after century, with no adjustment, no recalibration, no maintenance of any kind. 3 degrees, 500 years ago, carved by hand. Read that again if you need to. A stone carved by hand, no laser instruments, no digital compass, no GPS, aligned to the true rotational pole of the Earth to within 3 degrees, standing at altitude in the mountains of Peru, still accurate after 5 centuries without a single adjustment. The precision encoded in that one piece of granite matches standards used today for modern satellite calibration. So, hold all of this at once. The earthquake-proof placement on an invisible geological X, the 60% still buried underground, 12 unknown structures found in restricted zones, DNA of a deliberately assembled multi-ethnic population drawn from across an entire empire, and an astronomical alignment that rivals modern satellite technology. Here is the question nobody wants to ask out loud. How much of Machu Picchu has actually been discovered? 10%? 20%? What else is down? There, subscribe to Stellar Insights. Every week I cover the discoveries and the decisions behind them. Because what happens next is where this story stops being about archaeology. 3 weeks from protection to destruction. January 2026, Peru's Ministry of Culture signs a master plan for Machu Picchu's protection. Conservation guidelines, visitor management, preservation goals extending to 2046, 20 years of careful stewardship. On paper, exactly what every scientist had been demanding for years. 3 weeks later, February 2026, Peru greenlights the Chinchero International Airport. 3 weeks. From protected to flooded, this project had been dead for 15 years. Corruption investigations connected to Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht had killed it. Billions in bribes across 12 countries. Presidents fell. Officials went to prison. The Chinchero Airport went down with all of it. And then, in early 2026, it didn't just come back. It was fast-tracked. Target. Operational. Late 2027. 18 months from approval to planes landing. Projected capacity. 8 million visitors per year. Roughly 200% above current levels. Pushed through a valley already collapsing under the weight of its existing infrastructure. The runway goes directly on top of 600-year-old Inca agricultural terraces in Chinchero, still functioning. Same engineering tradition that built the underground systems beneath Machu Picchu, still draining, still irrigating. Built without a single repair in 6 centuries. Gone the moment the concrete arrives. Think about what that means. The terraces at Chinchero are not ruins you photograph. They are working infrastructure. Irrigation channels that have moved water continuously for 600 years are about to be paved over so planes can land on them. The same engineering intelligence we are only now beginning to understand, the same techniques that built the underground city beneath Machu Picchu, will be buried under a runway designed to bring in more people faster, not to study what is down there, to move past it and spend money in the gift shops. But here is the detail that should make your stomach drop. The capacity study, the official report determining whether the Sacred Valley can actually handle 8 million visitors a year, is not due until September 2026. 7 months after the airport was approved, they committed to the airport before the study that tells them whether the airport should exist. That is not a bureaucratic oversight. That is a decision made in advance of the data that might prevent it. And the scientists have not been silent. Dr. Salazar, researchers from Cambridge, Japanese archaeological institutions, all of them have published the same warning. The foot traffic, vibration, moisture, and construction at this scale pose direct, measurable threats to underground infrastructure that has survived 500 years. Peru's response to every single one of those warnings, nothing. No rebuttals, no counter-arguments, no acknowledgement of a single data point. One side has peer-reviewed research, DNA evidence, LiDAR mapping, geological modeling, and 5 centuries of structural proof. The other side has revenue projections and a runway blueprint. Follow the money. 8 million tourists a year flows to airlines, hotels, transport networks, and the same infrastructure contractors that have controlled Peruvian development for decades. It does not flow to archaeologists. It does not fund preservation. The people who benefit from that airport are not the people publishing warnings about it. What they do not want, studied. I need you to hear this clearly because I don't think the full shape of it has been said out loud yet. Scientists spent 5 years proving what Machu Picchu actually is. Not a vacation palace, not a ceremonial retreat. A deliberately engineered nerve center of an empire, genetically diverse, geologically perfect, built on an invisible X that took satellites to find, 60% still underground, aligned to the stars within 3 degrees, its plumbing outlasting every modern city built with steel and concrete. And the moment those findings were complete, the moment the data showed just how much more is buried down there, an airport project that had been dead for 15 years suddenly had to be finished in 18 months. Dr. Menegat published the geological X, Silence from Lima. Karamanica's LiDAR found 12 structures inside restricted zones. Silence. Salazar's DNA shattered the royal retreat theory entirely. Silence. And then 3 weeks after signing a 20-year protection plan, the bulldozers got the green light. I am not saying conspiracy. I am saying the timeline does not add up. And when a government goes silent across 4 separate scientific publications, DNA, LiDAR, geology, engineering, and then moves a dead airport project from the morgue to the runway in 18 months, immediately after those publications prove the site is more complex and more fragile than anyone previously understood. You do not need a conspiracy. You just need to follow what happened in order and ask who benefits. What if the scans found something specific? Something sitting in those restricted zones, in those 12 unexcavated structures, that is more valuable controlled than understood? What if someone looked at that geological X, at that underground city, at those DNA results pointing to a multi-ethnic imperial hub of unknown purpose, and saw not a heritage site, but an asset? The capacity report lands in September 2026. The airport opens late 2027. What happens between those two dates, to the restricted zones, to those 12 unexcavated structures, to the underground systems that have survived 5 centuries, is the question nobody in Lima wants answered publicly. Subscribe to Stellar Insights. This story is moving faster than anyone expected, and I do not think, not by a long way, that we have seen the worst of it yet. The countdown is already on, and Machu Picchu, the impossible city built on the impossible X, with more than half its secrets still buried in the dark beneath a mountain that was never supposed to give them up, is rapidly running out of time.